And apologies again for the delay. Um, we're now going to begin our committee meeting. Today is Tuesday, April 29, 2025, and it's about 10:20 a.m. here in the House chamber. And before I move to call to order, I'd like to first take this opportunity to introduce the members of the committee. To my left, we have our Vice Chairman, Representative Blas Jonathan Atto. And to my bottom left, we have our floor leader of the House, Representative Marissa Flores. And to her left, we have Representative Vincent Audon. And to his left, we have Representative Ralph Yumo. And to his left, we have the Vice Speaker of the House, Representative Diego Camacho. And to my right, we have our Representative Danny Aquino. And then to his right, we have Representative Joe Flores. We have a total of 8 members present today, so it constitutes a quorum to conduct our committee meeting. And I'd just like to also thank our LB staff who are here today. Thank you. And then now I'd like to call or ask for a motion to adopt today's agenda. Second. There's a motion to adopt today's agenda and has been seconded. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. Our agenda is hereby adopted. And then moving down to our next order of business under item 3, public comments. Our podium is now open for public comments. And before you give your testimony, please state your name for the record, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you. My apologies, and please stick to whatever's on the today's agenda. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Hiram Odon. On behalf of the International Association of Firefighters, I submit to this committee the letter of support from IAFF General President Edward F. Kelly. In addition to this letter, is a letter of support from our General Counsel of IAF, Peter J. Leff. On behalf of President Sasamoto, Poe, Vice President Edward De La Cruz Jr., and the entire Northern Marianas Professional Firefighters Union, Local 535, I urge you all to support the introduction of this bill to the committee, which protects our rights to organize labor as well as our right to collectively bargain. This bill does not just help the firefighters, but all public sector employees. This bill should not discriminate based on government agency you work for, nor public sector employees should be excluded from this historic bill. So please protect our rights, and thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, sir. The podium is still open for public comment.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm here to discuss HB 24-01. This is the to amend provisions in the Title VI, Chapter 3, Sexual Offenses. Obviously, I'm here in support, and my name is Chester Hines. I'm the Chief Prosecutor at the Criminal Division of the Attorney General's Office. I've been the chief prosecutor for about 3.5 years, and it's interesting that this is the time that we are here to make public comment on this bill. It's kind of we had to pull it back, and we made some revisions to it. I think it's better now. But this week, interestingly enough, we've had a lot of calls and actually warrants that have gone out for sexual abuse of minor cases. It just kind of reminded me about why I'm here and why this bill is so important. And this bill is really important because it will help with the prosecution of these cases. because sexual abuse of a minor is one of the hardest offenses to prosecute. Primarily, this is because offenses are usually committed in private. There's often little or no corroborating evidence, and it's usually one person's word against another. The onus is on the Commonwealth to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty, and the defendant is not required to prove innocence. That is why we want to update the sexual abuse of a minor statute to enable better prosecutions. These updates are not controversial. They are needed. This bill does not expand the prosecutor's power. It actually expands protections for minors. It helps in our ability to prosecute cases and get justice for victims. For instance, if you have a copy of the bill, in Section 1306 and 1307, the sexual abuse of a minor, first degree and second degree. That legislation draws a line at the age of 15, where the current bill that we are actually working with now has an age of consent of 13. The legislation in front of you sets guidelines and limitations for ages. 15-year-olds can date up to people, teenagers who are 18. 16 can date up to people who are 19. 17 up to 20. Basically, no person 21 and over can be intimate with any child 17 and under. The previous bill focused on children being exposed to family members and positions of authority. We took out family member and positions of authority language. We moved away from that language because everyone should be held responsible. And because children these days are meeting people not only in schools and family barbecues, but online and on social media. Many times a parent may not even know who their children are speaking to. And that brings up another reason why this bill is so important and why it should be passed right away. It will help victims in prosecutions, not 2 years from now, not 5 years from now, but it can help now, today. I just received a case this weekend where a 30-year-old was having sexual contact with a 16-year-old. Under the current statute, there's nothing I can do. That person cannot be charged because that person is not in a position of authority or a family member. He's a complete stranger. The old bill does not protect our children from complete strangers. The bill that I'm suggesting now, I'm recommending, that bill changes that. We also added a provision under 1308 for unlawful sexual acts with a student. This is to add extra protection for students who are going to school. They shouldn't be worried about the environment that they're in, worried about their teachers, worried about people who work at the school. We also added a part for general provisions where in this section we address concerns about there being a defense. For instance, if a potential defendant doesn't realize the age of the person that they're with, we added a defense in there so that to make sure that this law could be viewed as constitutional. Now, Section 1314, unlawful exploitation and voyeurism, this is absolutely needed. This section addresses issues we couldn't before because it did not exist. Under this bill, we can now charge someone for being a peeping Tom. We couldn't do that before. We can now charge someone for recording someone without their consent. We couldn't do that before. We can now charge someone for revenge porn, someone who threatens an ex-partner with a release of sex tape or pictures that they have taken consensually, but now that person wants to release those recordings to get revenge. We couldn't charge that before, but we can charge that now with this bill. And I know that there's been some concern about cultural dancing, whether someone could be charged for recording cultural dancing. No. Normally, what is done in public cannot be charged. This law is to prevent violations of people's privacy. And we couldn't do that before. We also changed some definitions in Section 1317, the definition of sexual contact. We added kissing. Imagine kissing wasn't a part of sexual contact before in the last law. It's there now. We changed the definition of consent. Now, there will never be a perfect definition for consent. We spent a lot of time dealing with this one. But we wanted the definition of consent to reflect true consent. For example, just because you buy someone drinks doesn't mean he or she consents to sex. A person must show their consent through words or behavior, a willingness to engage. Consent must be active, and consent can be withdrawn at any time. That means for there to be true consent, it must be throughout the entirety of the act. And lastly, we have a provision there for admission of other act evidence that makes the language clearer to allow evidence of repeat offenders to be used at trial. I ask this committee to give this bill consideration, and thank you for having us. That's it.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Hines, the podium is still open. Please state your name for the record and the item on the agenda that you are speaking on behalf of.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of this JGO committee. My name is Christine Aldon. I work at DYS under the Child Protective Services, and I'm here to present information in support of House Bill 2401, which seeks to amend provisions relating to the sexual abuse and assault of minors under Title VI, Chapter 13. So based on the data we have gathered, cases of sexual abuse involving minors continue to be among the highest reported offenses in our community. In the past year alone, from October 2024 to March 2025, we have 49 cases that were reported of sexual abuse of a minor. And for FY 2024, we had 102 cases of sexual abuse of a minor. And these are just only reported cases. Many of these cases involve trusted adults or individuals known to the victims, highlighting the need for stronger protections and updated laws. Our current provisions have not been revised in many years, and as a result, they do not fully reflect the severity and complexity of the crimes we are seeing today. Updating these laws through HB 2401 will help ensure that our legal system better protects minors, better holds offenders accountable, and sends a clear message that the Commonwealth prioritizes the safety and well-being of our children. So we respectfully ask for your support in moving this bill forward. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Aldon. The podium is still open.
Good morning, Chairman Joel Camacho and members of this committee. My name is Mariah B. Manglonia, and I am the Child Protective Services Supervisor under the Division of Youth Services. Thank you for letting me speak today. I'm here to support House Bill 2401. At CPS, we see these cases every single day. We see the pain that it causes our children, and the numbers show that it's only getting worse. In 2024, 1,474 children were abused. Of that number, 102 involved sexual abuse. This fiscal year alone, as of last week, Wednesday, we've received 318 new cases involving 858 child victims of abuse and neglect here on Saipan, 9 cases involving 15 children on Tinian, and 11 cases involving 26 children on Rhoda. And we're only partway through the fiscal year. These are not just numbers. These are children, these are families, and these are lives that are changed forever. This bill is very important because it gives stronger protection to our kids. It sends a message that we will no longer tolerate abuse, not from anyone and not anywhere. It shows our children that they matter, that their safety matters, and that the adults around them are willing to stand up and fight for them. Thank you for leading this effort, for standing with us, and most importantly, for standing with the children of the CNMI. We are ready to work with you, with our partners, today and every day forward to make sure that no child in the CNMI is left unprotected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Manglonia. Podium still open.
Hafaday and Tiro. I'm Dixie Enos, the Victim Witness Coordinator at the Victim Witness Advocacy Unit under the Office of the Attorney General. I stand before you respectfully asking for your support in reference to House Bill 24-1.
My apologies, ma'am. Is your mic on? Thank you.
Good. Hafaday and Tiro. Better. My name is Dixie Enos. I am the Victim Witness Coordinator under the Office of the Attorney General, a specific unit called the Victim Witness Advocacy Unit. I stand before you respectfully asking for your support in reference to House Bill 24-1. This bill strengthens the protections and safety nets of our children against these acts to include children who are not from the CNMI and lives here and considers the CNMI to be their home. Crimes involving sexual abuse of a minor, unlawful exploitation, voyeurism, and unlawful sexual acts with a student are one of the most pervasive violations of human rights and one of the greatest threats to lasting peace and human dignity. The effects are devastating and long-lasting. This violence has tremendous costs to communities, nations, and societies, for public well-being and safety, for school achievement, productivity, and law enforcement. When a child or young person is sexually abused, they're forced, tricked, or manipulated into sexual activities. They might not understand what's happening, that it is abuse, or that it's wrong for the abuser to do harm to them. They might be afraid to tell someone, or behave as though this is normal for them to experience. Both are valid for the child to be displaying. Sexual abuse can happen anywhere, and it can happen in person or online. It's never a child's fault that they're sexually abused. It's important to make children know this, and that the CNMI stands in union against these horrific acts. From January 2025 to present, our unit served victims involving in 2 sexual assault cases and 4 sexual abuse of a minor cases. It is just the first quarter of this year, and we are already tackling these cases. The numbers will rise in the months ahead. Previous years include 23 cases in 2024, 28 cases in 2023, 31 cases in both 2022 and 2021, 20 cases in 2020. Every year, these crimes are reported and the number fluctuates. What remains constant is that the victims are speaking up and reporting these cases to our local authorities in the efforts that justice is served and that their perpetrator are held accountable for their actions. Our community stands against these crimes and requires a community response as well as your support. Let's work together for the betterment of our children's safety and well-being. The safety of our children lies in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Enos, and my apologies again for interrupting you. Thank you. Podium still open.
Good morning, Hafide, Tito, Chair, and members of this important committee. And good morning to my amazing colleagues who are all here to speak on behalf in support of House Bill 24-01 to amend Title VI regarding sexual offenses relating to sexual abuse and sexual assault of minors. I've been here many times speaking about sexual abuse and sexual assault. My name is Macy B. Tenorio, and I work for the Northern Marianas Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. And many of you know that the coalition works for survivors of both domestic violence and sexual assault. And we have spent we have taken many opportunities to speak out on behalf of survivors here in this chamber, and every opportunity we get within our wonderful Commonwealth. So thank you for offering us yet another opportunity to be a voice for survivors. Our message has always been consistent. And I think we all in this room agree that every citizen here in this CNMI, most especially our children, deserve to live free of violence and abuse. And that's what this bill aims to do, right? Why are we doing this bill? Why have we worked so hard, many, many hours on this bill over the course of the last several years to update our statutes and our laws, to expand protections for our children, to ensure that we have a way to hold offenders accountable. So I want to spend a few minutes really talking about who are we protecting our kids from, right? Who are the sex offenders in our community? Last week, a couple weeks ago, we had a show on KKMP that talked about delayed reporting and talked about grooming. And Fran Mapan from the Office of the Attorney General talked about, who are the offenders in our community, right? She talked about grandparents, step-parents, uncles, coaches, teachers, people within our community that are often looked up to, respected, revered, people who have positions of authority over minors, people who have access to minors, people who children look up to, respect, love, and trust. These are the people who are violating and assaulting our children within our community. And I think it's really important to take a moment to really think about that, because we are all on board with protecting our children, but who are we protecting them from? We're protecting them from people that we know, people that we commune with and talk with and go to church with and work with. And that makes it extremely hard for us as adults charged with the safety of our children to hold other adults accountable. And so that makes this statute even more important, because we need to continue, right, to step forward in bravery and courage to do the right thing, to make sure that we are holding other adults accountable for sexually assaulting and sexually abusing the children in our community. Because without us, our children have no safety net, right? Especially in this community where we focus on family, we focus on love, we focus on our faith and our church. How do we reconcile that cultural norm with the fact that so many of our children are being assaulted here in the CNMI daily, right? You heard from Chief Hines, you heard from the DYS staff that these incidences are happening on a regular basis here. And if you also hear from the Office of the Attorney General that upwards of 90% of these cases involve minors, and most of those cases are cases where the offender is known to the victim. Sex offending behavior by sex offenders is deliberate. It's targeted. It's calculated. These are not just instances of somebody losing control, right? Sex offenders target and access and position themselves in ways where they can have access to children that they can abuse, that they can groom. So again, we encourage you not only to push this bill forward, but as leaders in our community, knowing that your constituents are experiencing these really horrific and devastating crimes, to really speak out. Use your influential voice to say that sexual abuse and sexual assault should not exist here in our beautiful and wonderful community, where we are dedicated to the protection of all, but especially our most vulnerable, our children, people with disabilities, our manamku. Our community needs to hear from you. Our survivors need to hear that you stand with them. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and we are wrapping up this month with an event tomorrow, and we invite you all to join us in Cagman, to show your support, to voice your support for survivors. I think it's really critical, especially now in this time of uncertainty, that we are united. Our theme this year is Solidarity for Safety. So we invite you to stand in solidarity with us, with the movement, with all of our colleagues here in support of survivors today and always. So thank you again for having us. And I think hopefully we'll have a chance to answer some questions that you might have. But we're all here for any questions that you may need. And I do want to take a moment to recognize Rep. Marissa Flores for working with us, pushing us and challenging us and responding to our call for support during the last legislature. So thank you so much. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Tenorio. Voting is still open.
Good morning, Honorable Chairman Camacho and Vice Chairperson Atta and our distinguished members of this very important committee. My name is Sonia Camacho. I am the Director of Courts, and I thank you for the honor to come before you today and this opportunity to speak on one of the items on the amended agenda. Present with me are my colleagues, our Budget and Finance Director for the Judiciary, John T. Villagomez, and our General Counsel, Hyun J. Lee. The item that we would wish to comment on is one of two items added to the amended agenda for today, and it is on House Bill 24-22 to repeal and reenact the Justice Center Revolving Act. The Chief Justice and the Presiding Judge, on behalf of the Judiciary, issued an April 28, 2025 letter to you, Honorable Chairman Camacho, and I would like to take this opportunity to add it for the record of the committee's deliberation, and if I may read the correspondence, would that be okay?
Please proceed, Ms. Camacho.
Thank you. The letter is dated April 28, 2025, and addressed to Chairman Joel C. Camacho of the Committee on Judiciary and Governmental Operations. It is regarding judiciary comments on House Bill number 24-22. Dear Chairman Camacho, we write to strongly oppose the passage of House Bill 2422, which follows House Bill number 23-114 in the 23rd Legislature, because of both bills' intention to remove critical and necessary funding from the judiciary. At the outset, it is important to address the fact that a USDA rural development loan has never been disbursed to the judiciary, nor has the Justice Center been constructed. Public Law 1967, which created the Justice Center Fund, recognized the need to expand judicial facilities, as well as of the Office of the Attorney General and the Public Defender's Office. This need remains. Additionally, House Bill 24-22 would repeal and reenact the JCF and divert critical court-generated revenues away from the judiciary's infrastructure needs. Diverting 75% of these funds to other agencies would undermine the judiciary's ability to maintain and improve justice facilities across the Commonwealth. For the reasons set forth below, the judiciary respectfully urges your committee to reject House Bill number 24-22, or alternatively, to allocate 75% of JCF revenues to the judiciary in recognition of its role as the primary generator and collector of these funds. Background and history of the Judicial Building Fund 1991 and Justice Center Fund Revolving Account 2016. The Judicial Building Fund. In March 1991, Public Law 725 established the Judicial Building Fund, the JBF, to finance the construction of a courthouse for the Commonwealth. Court collections were remitted through the Department of Finance, the DOF, and held as collateral for design and construction services. In 1993, Public Law 816 amended the JBF to allocate $250,000 for planning, engineering, and architectural services. A loan secured with the Northern Mariana Islands Retirement Fund, NMIRF, funded the construction of what is now the Guma Justicia. However, by the loan's maturity in 2015, approximately $4.8 million remained due, largely due to the DOF's failure to timely remit payments derived from revenues collected by the judiciary. leading to the CNMI government's involvement in Johnson v. Enos, case number 09-00023. Justice Center Fund Revolving Account. To address the arrears and fund the construction of the Justice Center, Public Law 1967 was passed. In September 2016, Public Law 1967 replaced the JBF with the Justice Center Fund Revolving Account, maintaining separation from the general fund. Under the approval granted by this law, the Judiciary sought a new loan from the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, under favorable terms. Although the USDA loan application, submitted in December 2016, remains pending, the original NMIRF loan was paid off by March 2022. The Judiciary continues to pursue the USDA loan to support infrastructure development, including a new Tinian courthouse. Redirecting JCF funds would now jeopardize critical justice system infrastructure projects. Court fines and fees. A majority of court revenues are derived from sources other than traffic citations. The JCF ensures that all criminal and civil fines and all revenues collected pursuant to the Chief Justice's rulemaking authority and all court fines or fees collected pursuant to any other law and remitted or paid to the Commonwealth Treasury pursuant to 7 CMC Section 3206 and 7 CMC Section 3251 are deposited into the JCF. Importantly, nearly 80% of revenues deposited into the JCF are derived from non-traffic related fines and fees. In fact, payable traffic-related revenues make up a small portion of court operations. Significant sources of these court revenues include Commonwealth Recorder's Office fees, such as recording fees for deeds, leases, and UCC filings, Clerk of Court record clearances, bar admission application fees, including Pro Hac Vice admissions, family court case fees, including motions and petitions for guardianships, appellate court filing fees, and probate, small claims, and other civil case filing fees. In fiscal year 2024, of the $996,914.87 deposited into the JCF, general court revenues accounted for $789,722.87, while payable traffic citations accounted for $207,192. This breaks down to general court revenues accounting for nearly 80% of all deposits, while payable traffic citations accounted for approximately 20% of deposits. Since the inception of the Judicial Building Fund in 1991 through the current JCF, revenues collected by the Judiciary were for the construction of the judicial building and were not intended for the Department of Public Safety. Such court revenue collections, if not diverted, would have been deposited into the general fund. By retaining general court revenues within the JCF, the Judiciary ensures proper management of funds to support its essential functions and maintain financial accountability. This approach safeguards the Judiciary's independence and reinforces its role in administering justice while ensuring fiscal transparency. Future of the Justice Center Fund Revolving Account. Furthermore, it is essential to note again that the USDA loan proceeds intended to support justice system facilities have not yet been dispersed, and building enhancements have not been completed. Therefore, any move to repeal this law prematurely would undermine efforts to secure these necessary funds and jeopardize our ability to maintain and improve justice system facilities vital to the administration of justice in our community. In both its 2018 to 2022 strategic plan and 2023 to 2028 strategic plan, the Judiciary identified developing and supporting specialty courts and renovating and maintaining the courthouses on Saipan, Tinian, and Rhoda as 2 of its 7 goals. These goals were identified through numerous meetings with stakeholders from the executive branch and legislative branch, as well as the CNMI Bar Association, CHCC, and other government entities and NGOs. The JCF will allow the judiciary to accomplish these goals. When the Justice Center Fund was established, the drug court program was still in its infancy, and the mental health court docket had not yet been created. Recently, former Congressman Kilili Sablan secured community project funding for technical assistance to assess the viability of a mental health treatment court, specifically with a docket for veterans. These specialty courts continue to apply best practices to serve the people of the Commonwealth, but their evolving needs demand more space, which the JCF can support. Importantly, the funds in this revolving account are not limited to Saipan and the judicial branch. They will also be used to support the construction of new facilities for the Office of the Attorney General and the Office of the Public Defender, and to improve court facilities on Tinian and Rhoda. This critical infrastructure is in line with the Judiciary's strategic plan, as well as the findings of the legislation that created the JCF. In Public Law 1967, the legislature recognized that construction of new buildings and or the expansion and renovation of the current building located on all three islands for the judiciary is of the utmost importance, and that these renovations and expansions are necessary for the people of the Commonwealth to have access to justice. A centralized justice center can serve multiple departments currently located within the Civic Center located in Susupi. A dedicated facility would provide much-needed space and resources for justice-related entities in the Civic Center complex area. By bringing these essential services under one roof, we can streamline interdepartmental collaboration, enhance public access to justice and emergency services, and improve overall operational efficiency. Additionally, upon the full repayment of the USDA loan, the law wisely allocates a portion of the collected funds to supplement the maintenance needs of the judiciary's facilities, demonstrating a forward-thinking approach to long-term fiscal sustainability. In fiscal year 2024, the judicial branch was only appropriated $312,804 for operations, of which $53,908 was for the required 1% fee for the Office of the Public Auditor. In the fiscal year 2025 budget, only the 1% fee for the Office of the Public Auditor is appropriated for the operations of the judicial branch. This lack of appropriated operational funding further underscores the critical importance of maintaining the Justice Center Fund revolving account to ensure the continued functionality and maintenance of our judicial facilities. Conclusion: the repeal and reenactment of the Justice Center Fund revolving account law would not only disrupt future financial commitments, but also risk removing critical infrastructure funding for the judiciary and related entities. For the foregoing reasons, the judiciary strongly opposes House Bill 24-22 and urges your committee to maintain this essential funding mechanism. Alternatively, the judiciary respectfully requests that 75% of the funds collected pursuant to subsection A of 1 CMC, section 3405, remain in the Justice Center Fund revolving account to supplement the maintenance needs of the judiciary's facilities rather than the currently proposed 25% in House Bill number 24-22. This request is justified by the fact that the judiciary is primarily responsible for the generation and collection of these funds. In fiscal year 2024, of the $996,914.87 deposited into the Justice Center Fund, general court revenues, which are generated through the judiciary's operations, accounted for nearly 80% of all deposits, while payable traffic citations accounted for approximately 20%. Given that the judiciary's efforts directly resulted in the overwhelming majority of the JCF's revenue, it is reasonable and equitable that an equivalent portion of the funds remain with the judiciary to address the ongoing and increasing maintenance needs of its facilities. We look forward to working with your office on matters affecting the judiciary and the law in this 24th Commonwealth Legislature. Siduus Maasi and Olamwai, signed Chief Justice Alexandro C. Castro, Presiding Judge Roberto C. Naraha, with courtesy copies going to Associate Justice John Manglonia, Associate Justice Perry Enos, Associate Judge Kenneth Govendo, Associate Judge Joseph Camacho, Associate Judge Teresa Kim Tenorio, and Associate Judge Lillian A. Tenorio. And that concludes my reading of the letter, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mrs. Camacho. Podium is still open.
Good morning again, Chairman Camacho and members of this committee. Again, my name is Mariah B. Manglonia, and I'm from Child Protective Services under the Division of Youth Services. I would like to briefly speak regarding House Bills 24-16 and House Bill 24-26. For House Bill 2416, which focuses on prioritizing kinship placement for children in protective custody, we believe that this is a very important conversation, and at CPS, we always aim to keep children safely connected to family whenever possible. We support the intent of this bill, but we do respectfully ask for some time to review the details so we can share input based on what we see in practice. And regarding House Bill 24-26 to amend the crime of child abuse, we are very encouraged to see movement in this area. We are also currently working on drafting new child protection laws for the CNMI, and we want to make sure that everything aligns. That way we are all moving forward together with strong, clear protections for our children. We respectfully ask for time to review both bills and would welcome the chance to collaborate and offer input based on real-life case experience. And we are committed to working hand in hand with this committee to build a stronger, safer future for our CNMI children. Thank you for your time and your leadership and your support.
Thank you, Ms. Manglonia. Your comment is duly noted. The podium is still open.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Doug Hardig. I'm the public defender for the CNMI, and I've wanted to address the committee on three separate bills, 2425, 245, and 241. I've written letters on all three of these bills. I've provided them to the committee. If, for whatever reason, there's a committee member that doesn't have a copy of the letter or would like to ask me questions about the letter, feel free to contact me. I'm available anytime that you'd like. But again, I can easily forward the letters again via email or any other way that you like. So as to all three bills, let me start with 2425, which, as I said in the letter, and I'm going to be brief and not just read the letter, but I'll just summarize our position. This is commonly referred to as, in some jurisdictions, would have been a three strikes law. And three strikes laws, or as Mr. Hines points out to me privately, it's actually a two-strike law. But that said, three-strike laws became popular in the United States in the mid-1990s. They became started getting repealed towards the early 2000s, 2004, 2008, because three-strike laws don't work. They're based on the premise that keeping people in prison longer for a subsequent offense is somehow deterrent, and all the statistics say they don't, whether it's the United States Department of Justice, United States Department of Prisons, go down the list. All of them say this doesn't work, this is not a deterrent, this is not the way to go, and we should learn from California's mistake. They made a mistake in 1994, they remedied it in 2008. We should learn from their mistake rather than repeat it. This is an expensive thing to keep people in prison for a long time when it doesn't serve any legitimate purpose, and statistics and studies bear that out. And just to be clear, we are not talking about violent offenders. Violent offenders, there's certain sexual offenders, crimes against people, assault with a weapon, that type of thing. Those already have their own built-in mandatory minimums. This is talking about keeping people in prison for much longer that are not necessarily violent offenders. And also keeping people in prison where we say they're felons, but they're not. Because this law says you can be convicted a second time around and have to do the entire sentence of the probationary period if you're on probation. But it also looks backwards to the prior conviction. And that prior conviction could fit what we would call a felony here, but it's not a felony where they got it, where the person was convicted. And an example of that would be theft. What we call felony theft, theft of something worth $250 or more. And that value is any reasonable calculation of the item. So for example, a used cell phone, a used flip phone, could be valued at $250. That would put you in this range where now you've got to do your entire sentence that you were originally on probation for. These are not talking about violent offenders. They're talking about people that have, quote, felonies. That same criminal, that same conviction is not a felony in, and I can name 30-something states. That is not a felony. Actually, it's 46 states, I think. That's not a felony. That's a misdemeanor. California being one. So Washington State another. I'm picking states where I know we have a rather large connection with our population going back and forth and such. So people from those states would now be prior convicted felons, even though California, Washington, other places, Oregon would say no, they're not. Another thing is what it takes out of the hands of the judge is anything other than the conviction. Someone maybe has a low IQ, a learning disability. They get no credit for that. They're doing their entire probationary sentence. Someone has bad education. For whatever other reason, none of these things that we would call in the legal system a mitigating factor, something a judge would look at to say, this person deserves the low end of a range. There is no range. You're doing your entire sentence. So there's a real problem. It takes the person out of the punishment, and all you're punishing is the crime, not the person. It also has a negative effect on disposing of cases, moving cases, right? We do plea agreements. Some people call plea bargains, settlements, whatever. Well over 90% of the cases end that way. And this is where the Attorney General's office has great leeway. If there's a range of punishment of 0 to 5, they can make an offer. They can make an agreement. Maybe you're going to do 2 years, not the 5. Maybe you do 6 months, not the 5. It incentivizes individuals to take responsibility and admit they've done wrong. This takes that away. There's no reason to admit it. No matter what I do, I'm getting the maximum. So why would I admit it? There's no reason. And it's going to increase the expense and the time and everything else that goes into a trial. And we all know the Attorney General's office, the courts, which you heard from, all these things take money, take time, and all you're doing is increasing that burden on all these different agencies and offices. So for all those reasons, and again, I've laid it out, and I've laid out the statistics from different states and the federal Department of I think it's DOJ, the evidence that shows this is really not a good thing. And after 14, 15 years of trying it, California had said no and backed away about 10 years ago. Moving on, I'll just briefly talk about 24/5, the jaywalking. I see two problems with that. One is the amount of punishment for this jaywalking statute. This seems like a minor thing, so I don't want to spend much time, but where you have a minimum fine of $75 up to $150. The problem with that, and we see it in traffic court all the time, if you can't just go to the window and pay it off, then you don't. And you do one of two things. You come to court on your court date, which is on the traffic ticket, and then the process drags on. The person wants to plead guilty, they want to pay the fine, they can't pay the fine. They just don't have that kind of money. Like a seatbelt is one of them where there's a big minimum fine, or driving while talking on the cell phone. So they end up taking months and months and months to pay. The judge is now monitoring the situation, and it takes a lot of time and effort and money to get this done. You see a smaller fine, $25 for speeding or having a bad taillight or something. People pay that off right away because they have it. And so the irony of it is, the smaller the fine, the more money you collect. That makes no sense, but that's the fact, because people are going to pay the small amount. They're not going to bother trying to fight it or deal with it or drag it out. They're just going to pay it. And that's, I think, it's a deterrent effect, because even $25, $50, I don't want to pay that, but I will if I have to. But when you get up to 150, now I got to think about that, or maybe I just don't have it. And so you make more money faster, easier, quicker, oddly enough, if the fine is smaller. And another problem with this statute is there's a large percentage, I think it's half of 60%. It's written strangely, so I guess that's 30%. Goes directly to law enforcement. What you're doing there is you're incentivizing people, traffic police, whoever is in charge of jaywalking, I assume is probably traffic police. You're incentivizing those people not to enforce the law, but to collect money. And that's not the same. And so is he 200 yards from the traffic light, or is he 150 yards from the traffic light? Well, he's 150, but I'm giving him that ticket. And that's money that goes to me. That pays my salary, maybe that pays for my uniform, my car, whatever it pays for. So you're incentivizing law enforcement to collect money for themselves. This should go into the general fund if you're going to have that situation, just as you would with a speeding ticket. All right, moving on to the 24-1, that's the sexual assault of a minor bill that's pending, and we've heard of several people, and I assume maybe some more. Everything we've heard so far and that I've listened to, it's the middle-aged older uncle forcing himself on the little child. Don't make any mistakes. That is not legal. That has never been legal, and it's not legal now, and it's getting enforced, and it's getting prosecuted, and people doing decades, multiple years in prison, and rightfully so. So that is not what we're talking about. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the 19-year-old who has a 15-year-old girlfriend, and we may not like that. That's repugnant to a lot of people. That's socially incorrect. 19-year-olds shouldn't have a 15-year-old girlfriend, but it goes on. Some of us, maybe some of us in this room, maybe I speak only for myself, had grandparents in that same situation. And grandpa would have gone to prison. Because if he kissed her, he's going to prison. He's 19, she's 15. The whole community knows, the parents know. The boyfriend is over to the girlfriend's house at Easter and Christmas, and he is going to prison because that's the mandatory minimums. He's 19, there's a kiss, she's 15, that's the end of that. Or he's 18, going to prison. 18, kissed a 15-year-old girlfriend. Now let's suppose he's 19 and the girl is 16 and they get married. They're married. He's 19, she's 16, he's going to prison. That's what this bill says. We are not talking about crazy old uncle helping himself to the 10-year-old niece. That's not the situation. That is already on the books. That's been on the books. That's not what this is about. So we also heard these cases are on the rise. When we say these cases, we're talking about the uncle, the 30, 40, 50-year-old, and the 12-year-old. They're on the rise, but they're not. You heard from the crime victim advocate, the reporting is going great, and the reporting is good and should be encouraged and continued. And that's correct. The reporting is on an upswing, not the assaults, and there's no statistics to say otherwise. There's no statistical evidence that the crimes are on the uprise, just that reporting is getting better. And again, these cases are talking about, Mr. Hines talked about the 30-year-old and the 16-year-old. That's not what this bill's about. This bill's about the teenager and the teenager. And it goes on with rules of evidence. This 1320 is a rule of evidence. What evidence can come into a trial? Well, at the trial, evidence that the accused offended earlier it could be a domestic violence case, it could be a sexual assault case, but this evidence of a prior act that can come in to trial. The problem with this is There's no time limit, and there's no standard of quality. So take the example of the 19-year-old now is accused of either having sexual relations or something like that with a 14-year-old. So the 19-year-old and the 14-year-old. Someone could come forward and say, he also touched me or did something years ago in a place far, far away, and that's good enough. So that other accusation, that prior accusation, which is evidence that he's guilty today, there doesn't have to be a conviction or an indictment or a charge or a police report or anything, just an accusation that somebody somewhere did the same thing. And if you want to talk about, get out of the teenage range and talk about what everyone else here wants to talk about, the 50-year-old who's now accused of having sexual relations with a younger person, someone under the age of 15, that accusation could be 30, 40 years old from a faraway land with no police involvement at all, just a prior accusation from decades past. Up until now, and on the books, there is one. If it's similar and it's less than 10 years old, fair enough. If this person's accused of, let's say, touching a 12-year-old, and 9 years ago, there's a different person, a different 12-year-old, and he was accused then of doing the same kind of thing, well, that sort of looks similar. That seems like it's a relevant piece of evidence. Let's put that in there. But what about a 30-year-old situation where there's never been anything? No official documents, no charges, no nothing. That is still, so these accusations could come out based on nothing, but that's okay, that's evidence. That's a real constitutional problem, that's a real fairness problem, and that shouldn't be allowed. Then the 1308 acts with students. It just says if somebody works at the school, at a school, or in the school system, and the alleged victim is a student at a school. So we have the 19-year-old senior at MHS and the 19-year-old, same age, senior at MHS, teacher's aide at Hopwood. If they get together, one of them is going to prison. How is that fair at all? So there needs to be guardrails. There needs to be limitations on this stuff. And what we've got right now, the current state of the law in this area, is perfectly adequate. We don't need to be sending teenagers to jail for having teenage girlfriends and boyfriends. We don't need to be sending a teacher's aide from one school to jail because their girlfriend is a senior at a different school. They never see each other in the workplace or anything. Doesn't matter. We don't need to bring in evidence that is 30, 40 years old based on a mere accusation into a trial where someone can get 30 years in prison. These are changes that are moving us in the wrong direction. So as to that, the 3 strikes, or rather 2 strikes and you're out, and these high misguided, or misdirected, I should say, fines, I think all 3 of these bills need to be revisited at the very least, but definitely in their current stage, they should not be passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Hartig. Podium is still open.
I just want to quickly respond. Thank Mr. Hardig for his comments on the bill. I mean, all constructive feedback is good. It's a good conversation to have. But there are some of the things that he represented that I think that
My apologies, Council Hines.
Yes.
If you would like to debate the bill, let's move forward in our order of business, and maybe we can dissolve into committee as a whole, if that's okay with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The podium's still open.
Good morning, Hafideh Zentiro, Honorable Chairman and Honorable Committee members of the JGO. My name is Kiki Uto Benjamin. I work at the Northern Marianas Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. I am the Associate Director there, and I'm here in full support of House Bill 24-01 to amend provisions in Title 6, Chapter 3, Sexual Offenses. My esteemed colleagues and members of the Sexual Assault Response Team had said everything that needed to be said, and so I'm going to say less, but I urge you all to pass this bill immediately. I know with, Public Law 12-82, that was since January 2002. So many things have changed. We are now in April, going into May 2025, and so it's long overdue. And I urge you all, with urgency, to put these safeguards in place for our children. Thank you, Sizus Masi and Hilisel.
Thank you, Ms. Benjamin. Podium is still open.
Thank you. Just one more comment. Again, my name is Macy B. Tenorio, and I also work at the Coalition. And I wanted to make a quick comment about House Bill 24-26 to amend the crime of child abuse. And in my quick and brief review of the bill, I noticed that the bill was discussing changing the law to include the use of methamphetamine in the presence of children. And there was one portion of the bill that said, that noted that pregnant women who use methamphetamine pass the drug onto their child, endangering the health of the child. And, in line with what DYS said earlier, we are in full support of the intent of the bill. We 100% agree that, methamphetamine for anyone, but especially our children, is extremely dangerous. One thing I do want to note and caution, though, is what we have learned about domestic violence cases is that oftentimes, or it can be, methamphetamine and other illicit drugs can be used as a control tactic. Where if the offender in this case is a male and the victim is a female and gets pregnant, the pregnant victim's use of methamphetamine could have been forced by the offender. This has happened many times here in the CNMI, where offenders will use methamphetamine or other illicit drugs, again, as a control tactic, because domestic violence is all about power and control. And so I just want to note that and caution that as we proceed with this bill, that we are not further penalizing victims of domestic violence who may have consumed crystal methamphetamine or other illicit drugs because their offender forced them or drugged them while they're unconscious, or through other means. So I just wanted to note that, and we welcome, again, any questions about domestic violence to further deepen your understanding regarding the unintended impacts that this bill might have on survivors. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ms. Tenorio. Podium is still open. Looking like there are no further public comments. We're moving forward under our agenda. Under new business, we have our first legislation, House Bill 24-01, to amend provisions in Title 6, Chapter 3, Sexual Offenses, Article 1, General Provisions relating to sexual abuse, assault of minors. Members, before I open the floor for vote for Committee of the Whole, the floor is open for discussion. Recognize our floor leader.
If we don't do what our job is, which is to develop and design policy that is fair, that is just, then we're really not doing our job. This bill was originally introduced in the last legislature, which did not pass due to the lame duck and the timing of that. Now here we are, months later, and the rise of cases against children rose. So imagine that. We lame duck because it's part of this process. And who really lost here? Who really suffered because of a lame duck? Okay? It's these kids, these minors, these children. And if we don't do anything now, what if it was your daughter? Because I'm not going to leave here knowing that when my kids have grandkids, I'm not going to be alive. But what if it was my grandkid? What if it was your grandkid? It's easy for us to speak about what we can do, what we shouldn't do, what the injustice is. But not one of us here, I don't think, has really dealt intimately with those that are tasked to advocate and stand up with them. Imagine the mental and spiritual effects of that as a child growing up. As a mother, I can tell you right now, I cannot deal with that thought. Now, while the law says don't take it into your own hands, I'll tell you what. If that happened to any one of us here, I don't think we'd be sitting here. We'd take the matter into our own hands. Really, because that would affect us. Any time you cross that line, something is wrong. Something's wrong in our community for adults to think that that's absolutely okay. The fact that we even have grandparents abusing that trust in our community. Now, I do agree that there is some limitations and there's consensual, this act of consent, right? When I was growing up, I had classmates of mine, 16, 17-year-old dating 22, 23-year-olds, but their parents knew because that was the conversation that we had to have. They had to have with their child. They had to be informed. They had to know. But now, that's 23 years later. Society has changed. Access to children have changed. And while the attorneys can agree and disagree, there's the courthouse to do that. That's what that's for. To debate the case. To prove beyond reasonable doubt that something happened. Our job is to design policy. Everybody has a job. Everyone has its responsibility. But we cannot afford another day for another case to be registered in the court, for another phone call for the victims to file their case. You know, you just can't. At some point, with all the bills that we introduce, be it this in the JGO, be it that in Ways and Means, at some point we just have to say enough is enough and change. Because we can't be telling our kids, do good, be good, then we come over here and we do the exact opposite. Because of politics, because of what reason? It's gotta stop. And I'm here to advocate for victims and survivors. These are kids. That's horrible. I mean, just think about that. Even as adults, when there is a cross and you violate an adult, man or woman, whatever it is, they go through something. They experience this change in their attitude, in their spirit, in their mental health. And even at that, the rate for suicide is high. As adults, going through the same thing, these are kids. And every time we come with a bill, any bill, I always try to put myself in that situation. What if that was me? What if that was my kid? What if that was my niece? What if that was my nephew? What if? That's what I think about. And 23 years of what ifs later, that's enough. That's enough. I don't know if I have anything more to say because it kills me inside. It affects me because these are kids in our community. And as a mother, I can't help but not cry. Because what do I say to their parent if we don't act on this and something happens and they come to me, Hafalai, Marissa, why didn't you guys do something? What is my face? What is our face? I can't be with my kid all the time, but at least we can design a policy and a law that can protect them from predators. Because there's places where people that suffer from some kind of mental illness, they could get the help. But not once do you ever see a predator say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sick, I'm a predator." He doesn't say that. He doesn't have to say that. He just has to get caught. And that by that time it's too late. But this is not a place for us to decide and listen to the case beyond reasonable doubt or whatever that is. That's for the court to handle. Our job here is to develop policy and ensure that we safeguard our community. Lives, fiduciary responsibility, it all boils down. It all connects somehow. But I just cannot. 23 years later is beyond me. I don't know what was important 23 years ago, but right now, this is important. And the cell phones, the voyeurism that they're talking about, I know of people, of children, that are being threatened, that have had their pictures shared because the technology can allow that. Imagine that. And what happened to that? Nothing. When do we say enough is enough? I'm hoping today would be that day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Thank you, Representative Flores. The floor is still open for members. Recognize Representative Aquino.
I'd like to offer my support for House Bill 24-1. I agree with my colleague that enough is enough. Whether it's sexual assault of a minor or stuff, the crime rate in the CNMI needs to be addressed. There are serious problems going on, especially when it deals with minors. I have 2 granddaughters, and you know what? I don't want none of this thing to happen to them. Who speaks out for the victims? Let's say like in 24-25, who speaks out for the victims? Do you think the victims of these things in 24-1 are going to be content? No, there's a possibility they may not. But I'll tell you what's going to happen. They're going to endure long years of rehabilitation because they've been affected. Their innocence was stolen from them. And now it's time to pull the plug on these sexual predators. And I think the saying that enough is enough is a clear message to the public that we cannot tolerate crimes involving our children as well. That we need to put our foot down and we should act, not react. We should act now and pass this bill. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Aquino. The floor is still open for members. If there's none, I'd like to motion to dissolve into committee of the whole so we can take in the rebuttal comments from Council Hines and maybe have a discussion with the PD. There's a motion to dissolve into committee of the whole, and it has been seconded. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, say nay. We are now under committee of the whole. Mr. Hines and Mr. Council Hines and Council Hardick, you may enter our chamber or the. Okay. Thank you. And members, if you have any further questions, clarifying questions, feel free. My apologies, Council Hines. Under public comments, we're not allowed to debate anything under the agenda unless we dissolve into committee of the whole. So my apologies for just interrupting you, but you may proceed.
Yeah, so I'll keep it brief. I just wanted to respond a little bit, and I want to say thank you to you guys for your support so far. But so far in the comments, I think what Mr. Hardig was saying is correct. The legislation that we have right now does deal with family members and people in positions of authority. That's already covered. We understand that. The uncle, the grandfather, so on and so forth, we get that. What this legislation that I'm proposing and that we're proposing and that we support expands that protection to not just family members and people in positions of authority. It expands that protection to people who are strangers, just like Congresswoman Flores said. Our children these days are not just meeting people at the family barbecue or church. They're meeting people online. They're completely exposed, and they're right now in the current legislation that we have to live with right now. There's no protection, and just like I said before, and Mr. Hardig was talking about the reporting system is fine right now. The numbers are not increasing, or they're increasing, or whatever. The numbers that we have right now that DYS is reporting, the coalition is reporting, don't even reflect the number of cases that we could be charging for those that where we're talking about strangers and our children, because the current legislation does not protect against that. And as far as the guidelines that are set up in the age ranges, the current legislation does have age ranges. Those age ranges allow for a child as young as 13 to have sexual relations. We picked that guideline up to 15. And we set a range that that 15-year-old can have relations up to 18. That is a reasonable range to set. Yes, Mr. Hardig is saying that, oh, so now the 19-year-old, the 20-year-old is going to be going to jail. Well, that's not accurate. When it comes to prosecution, and Mr. Hardig knows this, there's a lot of factors that we take into account. But what this legislation is set to do, the policy that we are asking for it to set, is to protect our children from complete strangers, from family members, and from people in positions of authority, all of it. Any age where our children could be vulnerable. So I'll ask, if there's any questions, I'll respond.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Hardick, if you'd like to respond.
Turn this thing on. Okay, thank you. Again, I'll be brief, but there's talk about policy, and this body is passing policy, and things need to change, and some things need to stop, and it's a matter of policy. I would just have to point out that we're not talking about a shift in policy. We're talking about sending people to prison. And as far as debating what something means or what something doesn't mean in court, we can only debate things in court if there's ambiguity, and there's no ambiguity here. This is really clear. Being 18 years of age, the offender engaged in sexual contact, which is kissing, with a person who is 15, 18-year-old girlfriend, 15-year-old boyfriend. There's no getting around that. Arguing in court is, what does 15 mean? That's even talks about when you start calculating the date of birth. What does 18 mean? 18 means 18. There's no way to debate that. We're not going to debate that. What does it mean to be beyond a reasonable doubt? Well, if she's 18 and he's 15, there's no debate about what that means. That's not a matter of policy. That's not a debate. That's an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old. And, well, what about the evidence? There's no doubt about evidence. They did it at a family barbecue. Everybody saw them kissing. There's no debate. Well, what are we going to do with this guy? We should do with the 18-year-old, whether it's the male or the female. What we should do with them is say, knock it off and give them a punishment. Right? That punishment is 2 years in prison. Maybe 15. 15 years in prison. The AG's response is, well, you know we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't, under that facts, we would not send a person to prison for 15. We would not request the judge to do that, and you can trust us. Why should we trust someone with that sort of responsibility, with that sort of leeway? We can trust Chester, of course. Can we trust the next guy? How do we know? We don't know. And we trust the next guy to do the right thing and come up with the minimum. So now that 18-year-old girl goes to prison for only 2 years. Is that really, somehow that stops the 60-year-old pervert from attacking the 10-year-old girl? No, this is a cure for a non-existent problem. This doesn't address what we're talking about. Old man attacks my 12-year-old girlfriend, and I'll take the law into my own hands and beat him up. You're probably going to get, even if you're charged with beating him up, you're going to get some sort of acquittal based on a justifiable enragement, right? That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about teenagers. And then we talk about the school. You don't want the adult teacher having sex with the 14-year-old girl. He's intimidating. He's overbearing. She has the consent is a ridiculous thing for anyone to say. That's, even though she didn't fight or argue or anything, that's not consent. We all know that. That's not consent. And he should go to jail. That's not what this talks about. This talks about the two 19-year-olds who don't even go to the same school. That's what this is. The 19-year-old teacher's aide at Hopwood, the 19-year-old high school senior, and if my scenario is so ridiculous that eyes should roll and people shouldn't even listen or shouldn't think about it, then write the statute that says you can't go to jail for that. Rewrite the statute. It's a teacher, it's someone else in authority, for example, and list it. Everyone who could be in authority, like teacher, principal, all those types of people, teacher's aide, and someone at the same school who they have authority over. Not two people from different ends of the island where this doesn't come into play. And then you also want to have, coming in as evidence of guilt, some sort of recent accusation that something else happened with somebody else 30, 40 years ago. Somehow that makes sense. That's beyond unfair. Answer for what you did 30 years ago, even though at that time no one said anything to you about it. That's just terribly unfair. And that's not policy, that's real evidence. That's how it's going to come into court. And the defense lawyer can argue how unfair it is and how it shouldn't come in. That's irrelevant. If the law says that comes in, then that comes into the trial. So that those three things, you're punishing consensual acts with teenagers, you're allowing people of both of a teenage age where there's no one has any sort of authority or any kind of supervision over another person, but they both happen to be involved with the school system. And then there's the rule of evidence where you can bring in any accusation from any period of time to try and say that proves somebody's guilty of what happened right now. These three things are really, you should not allow this to happen, and this bill should be either scrapped completely or reworked.
Again, just really brief, the guidelines that are set up, the age ranges that are set up, I think are reasonable. It does expand the protection for children. But I want to, again, thank Mr. Hardy for his comments. He brought up Section 1308, the unlawful sexual acts with the student. I'm not sure if he was reading it correctly, but it does, that specific point that he was making was something that we addressed when we were actually trying to figure out the best way to do the statute. And the actual language does state that it is unlawful for any person employed by any educational institution to engage in sexual acts as defined by this statute with any student of any educational institution where the offender is employed or contracted. So we're not talking about one, as the example he's saying, 19-year-old from one school and a student from another school. We're actually talking about within the same school. I think that makes it reasonable for that person who's employed there to understand that we don't want that person who's employed at a certain school messing with the kids at that school. They're responsible for those kids. They're supposed to protect those kids, but instead, we have to have statutes like this to protect them from these teachers, because sometimes that happens. So if we read the actual statute, we understand that we are trying to make reasonable efforts to expand protections for children. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, to that part, it says any educational institution. That does not narrow it down beyond PSS as opposed to a private school, one or the other. So it really doesn't narrow it down, and you still end up with a situation, even if I think it's ambiguous at best. And why we can't just say a position of authority or teacher / principal / position of authority? I don't know why we need to undo that. And again, even looking at that example, you have a teacher's aide in the 8th grade, 9th grade, 19-year-old cannot be involved with the 19-year-old senior. That's 12th grade. It really doesn't, where they have no contact, no authority, no position over that person. In fact, could be younger, than the actual, than the student. So again, this is overbroad and it's just ready for abuse, and that it should not be this way. The one that the statute as it's written covers this issue with teachers having coercion and principals having a coercive effect, and other people who are authoritative figures at that school over the students.
Before any of you rebuttal, does the member have any questions for recognized Representative Flores?
Thank you, Chairman, for breaking out into committee and allowing this process to happen. And once again, thank you to the two attorneys for enlightening us with your legal interpretation of this bill. And again, I'll be very clear, that's up to you guys, can argue that in the court. This here, we have a job here to do. And as Public Defender Hardy had mentioned, it's either we scrap it in its entirety or do something with it. Attorney Hardick, how long have you been can I ask a question to him directly?
You have the floor.
Attorney Hardick, how long have you been a public defender?
A public defender since 1988.
And how many cases have you tried in regard to sexual abuse of a minor?
I don't really know or keep those stats. I'd say a few dozen.
A few dozen between 1998 to now?
1988.
Oh, sorry, 1988 to now?
That went to one of my other points as to the other bill. The huge majority of cases, and again, I don't have the stats in front of me, but a huge majority of the cases do result in an admission of guilt, in pleading guilty.
Right.
So the number of cases that go to trial is relatively small.
Okay, but
So given that, and given you're specifically asked to sexual abuse of a minor, I'm sorry, sexual abuse of a minor, yeah, I would say no more than 15 or 20 maybe.
since 1988.
Yes.
And how many plea bargain cases have you had that were directly involved with sexual assault of a minor?
Several hundred. I don't know.
That's a lot.
Well, most of them were.
But it's a lot, right? Plea deal. Because they didn't go to jury.
You talking about here? You mean in the CNMI?
I wouldn't be talking about California.
Well, you said since I was a public defender, and I tried many cases in the United States.
No, I'm talking about here.
Then it'd be far, far, far fewer.
Of plea
I was
deals?
talking about 1998. I didn't come here until 1999.
No. How long have you been a public
19
defender for the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands?
For the Commonwealth, 1999.
Okay, and how many cases have you tried that were against individual that involved sexual assault cases of a minor?
A minor? Half a dozen, maybe.
How many pleas?
I don't know, 20, 30?
That's it?
Yeah.
Are we not catching them, or
I'm
they
sorry,
just not?
There aren't as many as you think. There could be more than, it could be more. It could be 30, 40.
That's
It
a
could be.
big number for me. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Representative Flores. Any other members?
Could,
Go ahead, proceed.
it's not that there isn't sexual assault of minors going on here in the CNMI and throughout the country and throughout the world. It's not that they're not getting caught. It's not that they're not getting prosecuted. It's what the issue is. Do we need another bill to further punish teenagers, to change the rules of evidence, and to allow employees of a school system to be prosecuted just because of where they work? And I think that's what this bill does. And that's the problems. That's the three major problems with this bill. And that's why we're opposing this bill.
Recognize Rep. Flores.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Hardig. Attorney Hines, does the public school system have systems in place already that, or mechanisms that if an event like this occurs, are there systems in place for the schools, the counselors to, I guess, remedy and bring about these charges filed at the Office of Attorney General with the public school system? Do they have their own internal standard operating procedures when it deals with sexual assaults of minors?
I would have to. If I can answer that question, I would say yes, they do, but I don't think it's strong enough.
Okay, so this provides again additional, right?
Exactly.
Safeguards because the public schools also don't have those mechanisms on how to address such incidences.
Well, what I can say is that there's been, I would say, 2 or 3 cases recently that I have not been able to go forward on because of they stem from the public school system, and for whatever reason, I'll say this: this statute would have changed the game for those cases.
Okay.
And I also want to say, Mr. Hardig mentioned earlier that we're talking about a non-existent problem. That is not true. When we're talking about expanding the protections so that we're taking it out of just family members and people with positions of authority, and expanding it so that our children cannot be taken advantage of by complete strangers that they meet on the street or online, that is an important policy decision for this body to make. And it's time for a change.
And I agree. Last comment, Chairman. The public defender and the prosecutor both have different tasks. Let's be clear about that, okay? Each defend their own, right? Depending who moves it or what have you. But each has its own task. Now, the public defender has an obligation to protect the defendant. Civil rights, you name it, whatever, okay? Just to make sure. The prosecutor has another task, right? To ensure that the alleged defendant is tried in court for whatever it is crime that was brought upon him or her. Correct? Each of you guys have your own job. Okay. I thank them for coming and expressing the importance of supporting it and not supporting it. But at the end of the day, we have our own job. And I would do an injustice to the people, to the children of the Commonwealth, if we don't act on this bill. And again, the court is there for them to decide that, yes or no. The judges, unfortunately, won't comment on any of this because, they have their own function and their own job. This here, debating about, what is extreme, what's not extreme, we can leave that to the courts to handle. And if the courts believe that this is unfair and it needs to be changed, they will make that very clear in the court. So, again, at the end of the day, I'm just here to support this bill. At what point do we say enough is enough? And at this point, I'm saying today I've had enough with crimes against children, sexual assault of minors, even adults for that matter. But 23 years of doing nothing, that's an injustice.
Thank you, Rep. Flores. And in the interest of time, I know we're approaching the lunch hour. I will allow Ms. Tenorio, thank you, allow you to make your comments, and then I'll allow another 10 minutes to debate this legislation before us, House Bill 24-01, and then we will be rising back into our committee meeting. Ms. Macy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, committee members. I do want to address three things that I've heard come up in this discussion so far. The first thing is the question about PSS regulations. And so PSS does on a number of different levels, whether it's an outside person, not a school employee, that is the offender, if the school employee is the offender. But we have seen in recent cases where, let's say, for example, a school employee is the offender. If the employee resigns from PSS, then those administrative procedures and regulations are moot. So we do really definitely need the criminal side to be there, right, in case those situations happen, because that has happened recently within our in recent cinema history. I do also want to note, Mr. Hardig was talking earlier about teenagers having sex. As much as many of us who are parents don't want to admit or think that our teenagers are having sex, they are. And Chief Hines said it earlier that we had a very long discussion about this, right? At what point do we respect the agency of our teenagers to make those decisions? And at what point do we come in and say, you're too young to make the decision? So, after months, years really of this discussion, not only as a team, but also with our community, with parents and with students directly having these conversations, we definitely felt that raising the age of consent from 13 to 15 was critical. That was a non-starter for us. If we needed to change 13 up to 15 or 16, we landed on 15. But recognizing the fact that teenagers do make these choices, and we don't want to criminalize all teenagers for making this decision, we expanded the years. The current law is Public Law 12-82, and in 12-82, the gap is 3 years. We expanded that to 4. So, because we recognize, right, that this happens, and our goal is not to criminalize teenagers having sex with other teenagers. So I just wanted to emphasize that point. The other point I wanted to address is the idea that accusations from decades past are not relevant. And I, with all due respect, I disagree with that point, because we have seen for decades that sexual abuse and sexual assault cases, there's very low reporting. Many survivors and victims of sexual assault report late, if ever. Just last week, we were in presentations where adults are disclosing their experiences with sexual abuse for the very first time. Because we are presenting and we create a safe space, and they say, this happened to me when I was a child, and I never told anyone. Their research is very clear. Our experience is very clear with regard to the situation, that delayed reporting is the norm. And so when we talk about accusations from decades past, we recognize, right, that the reason why we see this delayed reporting is that there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of shame. We can go on and on about why delayed reporting exists. Right? We just know and have to accept the fact that that is the norm with sexual abuse and sexual assault cases. The other thing I want to know, and I didn't discuss it earlier in terms of sex offending behavior, is that many sex offenders are serial offenders with multiple victims. So it's really critical to understand and note that I mentioned in my public comment about the other bill that domestic violence is about power and control. Sexual assault is also about power and control. It's not just about the sex. The sex is the means to the end. So when we talk about offenders who use sex to gain power and control over minors, and that power and control goes unchecked through the system or non-reporting or whatever, the likelihood of them continuing to offend is there, right? So we just have to Google sex assault, sexual abuse cases, and we'll see within the CNMI and nationally, right? The cases will just pop up of cases that involve multiple victims over a number of years. And so I think it's important to note that exists within sexual abuse and sexual assault cases, that we cannot just dismiss accusations from many years ago because they're older, they're from decades past. When we're talking about sexual abuse and sexual assault, those accusations are critical. They're important because it shows, again, the serial nature of the crime and the person's use of power and control to continually offend. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Tenorio. Members, if you like to respond, or I'm going to allow Council Hines and Council Hardick to make any closing statements if they'd like.
Previous body passed legislation to lift the statute of limitations on these types of crimes, and that was a excellent policy decision at the time, because this community needed that. It needed to reflect what's happening in other jurisdictions. And specifically, the part of the statute 1320 that allows for previous evidence, that part of the statute needs to also reflect what this body has done in the past, meaning the statute of limitations, because previous evidence from, and I understand what Mr. Hardig is saying, from 20, 30 years ago, needs to be able to come in if it can. But please don't, I mean, what Congresswoman Flores said is critical. What we argue about in court, because that situation would be argued about in court. We would have to do a motion, we would have to go through with the judge, and this is not just an automatic, oh, snap my fingers, I wish, but that is not what would happen. We would go to court, we would argue it, the judge would be the one to decide. There's currently a type of 1320 exists in the current legislation, and how many times have I tried to get previous evidence in through judges here, and I've been unsuccessful. So this is not just an automatic thing where the prosecutor gets his way, all the evidence comes in. That doesn't happen. In closing, I just would ask that this body move this bill forward. It's an important bill. It does expand protections, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, and just a couple of replies. First off, what 1320 does, it takes away the judge's ability to see, is this relevant? Does this prove anything? Should this be used in court? This takes that away This says it is relevant with no further understanding of what the accusation is from 30 or 40 years ago. It's just coming into evidence. And as far as these laws haven't changed in 20-something years, we just heard they changed about 10 years ago, and we put in certain ages and other things. This is a complete revision of the sexual assault statute that took place, I want to say 8 to 10 years ago, but it hasn't been all that long. And you cannot, things are not left up to judicial interpretation. That's more of a procedural thing at an appellate level. That's not what happens. That's just not how court works. Court looks at what you've written and they apply it. And if it says the person is 15, then that's it. The court can't say, well, 15 doesn't mean 15 on this particular case. 15 means 15. They can't say kiss doesn't mean kiss because we like the defendant or because these people were a boyfriend, girlfriend, and the whole community knew about it. That doesn't change the definition of kiss. That this relationship was accepted with the family or everybody else that might be involved, friends, neighborhood, whatever. Everybody knows that these two have been dating and going out and it's a romantic thing. That doesn't change the definition of kiss. It doesn't change the definition of what is 19 years old. So that's the real problem with this. This is not the time to kick it down the can and say, we'll pass a bad law and let the courts straighten it out. That's not how it works. Their hands are tied. And that's the problem with 1320. Right now, the courts do have some leeway in interpreting what is or isn't relevant. This takes that away. And it doesn't matter what the accusation is, where it came from, who it came from, that's going to be used in this person's trial. And it doesn't matter what the relationship was or how consensual it was or how much the parents were all for it. The 19-year-old might even be living with the 15-year-old with the parents. Doesn't matter. 2 years in prison is the minimum. So that's the problem. You're not leaving this up to judicial interpretation. You're telling the judges exactly what has to be. And that's why I think this should be either totally scrapped or rewritten.
Thank you, Council Hardick. And just for the members, just a note to the members that it is crucial that in spite of all the support that we've heard today and the testimony, it's crucial that we hear both sides of the legislation before us. And at the end of the day, it's going to be a policy call. And with that said, is there a motion to rise back into our committee meeting? There's a motion to rise back into our committee meeting, and it has been seconded. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. We're back into our committee meeting. Council Hines, Mr. Norio, and Council Hardick, we appreciate your time up here to discuss this with the committee.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
With that said, members, I know we are at the lunch hour, so is there a motion that we recess and get back at maybe 1:15 so that we can allow our staff to have their lunch? All right, there's a motion to recess and to reconvene at 1:15, and it has been seconded. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. We're hereby on recess. Thank you all for your testimony. We are now back into our committee meeting. And before we left off for recess, we were under discussion for House Bill 24-01 to amend provisions in Title 6, Chapter 3, Sexual Offenses, Article 1, General Provisions relating to sexual abuse, assault of minors. The floor is now open for any members to comment. Recognize Representative Flores.
Thank you, Chairman, and I guess this morning's conversation with those present warranted a little tweak. This time, I'd like to motion for, to offer an amendment on House Bill 24-1. So move. I think it's been
Representative Flores, so you're motioning to
offer an amendment.
offer amendments?
Correct, on House Bill 24-1.
There's a motion to amend House Bill 24-01, and it has been seconded. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. And may you please share your amendments with the committee members? Thank you. Short recess. Legal counsel, explain the amendments. In general.
Thank you, Chairman. Prior to the end of the 23rd legislature, we were working out some changes to address the comments that were received by all the stakeholders. And based on instructions from Rep. Marissa Flores, I communicated with the stakeholders and took their comments into consideration and incorporated it into a draft bill. And that draft bill is basically before the committee today. It would have been additions and amendments to the bill that passed the House that would have been hopefully incorporated into the bill on the Senate side if the Senate had time to amend it. But the Senate side didn't have time to amend it before the Sinodine. So this version basically reflects the changes requested by the stakeholders and approved by Rep. Marissa Flores, and this is what's in front of the committee for consideration today. Is that all right? Yep.
Recognize Rep. Flores.
Yes, and Joe, there were not many amendments here. They're very small, kind of technical amendments, and I believe that one here is on what we're looking at in 24-1. On 24-1, page 7, line 3, subsection 1308, line 5. The subsection 13.7, where it says 6, that should have been a 3. So that was one of the amendments made. And then in the, oh, there it is, let's see, on 3. And then on the facts and findings, page 1. Yeah, there. So that was a 6, as you see it in House Bill 24-1. There it is. 1308. Institution to engage in any sexual acts as defined in 6 CMC. On House Bill 24-1, it shows number 6, that should be number 3 and not number 6, and that was a technical error. And then on the first page, on line 7, no, I'm sorry, wait a minute. Starting on line 3, these offenses are especially egregious when committed against minors who cannot legally give consent in situations involving significant age differences, family members, or individuals in positions of authority. That was struck out, and it ends at differences, period. So you see that on House Bill 24-1, House Draft 1, I believe, HS1. So we took out family members or individuals in position of authority because we know that the public law, I believe it was 12, is it 1227 that they were referencing in the beginning, already addressed that in the law, that it covered positions of authority and family members. So that was the only changes. I don't know if you guys have any other questions, but there were no significant changes to any of the subsections except for that one line or that one number there that should be a 3 and not a 6. Everything else stays the same, and I am open to any other questions. Thanks.
Representative Flores, just to clarify, the bill that's reflecting on our agenda is House Bill 24-1, and we haven't proposed any amendments. So, yeah, your amendments would be, because I could have sworn I heard you mention House Draft 1, HS1. So it's just, the bill would probably be moving forward in the form of House Substitute 1 if we were to adopt this amendment.
Thank you for that, sir. I'm sorry to Chairman for any confusion. I apologize.
No worries. So there is a motion to amend House Bill 24-1 to reflect, which would change the bill to House Bill 24-1, House Substitute 1. Discussion. All those in favor of to amend House Bill 24-1 to House Substitute 1, say aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carried. House Bill 24-1, House Substitute 1 has been, the amendment has been adopted, and I'm back to the main motion. House Bill 24-1, House Substitute 1, further discussion. Members, you ready to move this out of for committee report? All right, there is a recognize Rep. Yumo.
Thank you, Chair. And just so that we're clear, we're acting on the HS1 version. I understand the public defender made a comment with regards to certain issues. I do support the bill. I just want to air out concerns that there's going to be someone that's going to end up suing the legislature, just like how I was sued by Bridge Capital for amending a e-gaming. I was personally sued, and that allowed, I believe it was Bridge Capital, and it set precedents. Judge Governmental at the time said to Bridge Capital go up there and negotiate the true intent of the e-gaming. So I just want to be clear that there was a lot of concerns that was brought out, and to be prepared in case we are personally sued because someone's son or 18-year-old that got caught, whatever, which I do condone. If they are underage, they should be, at least the committee is very clear that we are setting precedents and that I'm also saying that the court also has taken a position to say to the defendant, go up there and negotiate it with the legislature. I just make a comment.
Thank you for that, Rep. Yumon. As I did state earlier, before we got into recess, there will be a policy call on our end. And Council, would you like to maybe comment on Rep. Yumo's statement, or are we okay? Or
I don't need to hear a comment. I'm just saying it's a concern because the court has also taken a position to say go up there and negotiate it with the legislature. That's only a comment because I was in that situation where we had Bridge Capital came here and we had to renegotiate everything. So just letting you know that there is the court set precedents in that.
thank you, Rep. Yumo. Recognize Rep. Flores.
Thank you, Rep. Yumo, for the fair warning. I think for me, I am a strong supporter of this bill, as I mentioned in the beginning. But when you're comparing iGaming to sexual abuse and assault, I think that's apple and orange. But if the court were to dictate and tell anybody to come up here to negotiate, then I think the court also has its responsibility to respond to us when we ask them for comments. So at this point, I've offered the amendment. There is we should be making a motion to pass the amendment, policy call. And again, at the end of the day, we must decide as a legislative branch to create policies that aim to protect all peoples. And this one is very specific towards minors. And I think the discussion between the two attorneys brought us into the courtroom at some point today. That took very long, but they expressed both sides. We heard both sides, and I'm ready to place my vote. Thank you, Chairman.
So, is there a motion to prepare a committee report for the passage? Or
So move, Mr. Chairman, that House Bill 24-1 HS1 right, that this committee will vote on and pass, and that the committee furnish a report to be placed on the bill calendar for vote. Thank you.
there is a motion to prepare a committee report for the passage of House Bill 24-1, House Substitute 1, and it has been seconded. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. All those opposed, say nay. House Bill 24-1, House Substitute 1 is hereby recommended for passage on our next session. Next on our item, or under our order of business, we have House Bill 24-02 to establish a process for the delivery of a State of the Commonwealth address to the legislature by the governor. Discussion. You recognize Rep. Yumo, if you'd like to maybe briefly
Sure.
explain your bill
Thank
to
you,
the
Chairman.
members.
I guess the House Bill 24-2, there is I guess we passed a joint resolution last week, and because this is a bill that was introduced last legislature, I reintroduced it again, and it's up for the adoption of this committee for consideration. Thank you.
Floor is still open. Recognize Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in support of 24-2. I think we should move ahead and adopt it so we can get it to the full body. This legislation, at the very minimum, would obligate the administration to provide a State of the Commonwealth, whether it's live, recorded, or a written address to the legislative body. So it's not gonna affect the decisions of the legislature, but at the very least, it's going to provide the legislature with at least true numbers that we are facing as a Commonwealth. And the greatest thing about the legislation is it included the month of March, which is pre-budget season, and it'll at least give the members of the legislature the findings of what we've done in the current fiscal year and how we've progressed over that fiscal year and what are the plans for the subsequent fiscal year. So I think we should move ahead with this legislation. If there's no objection from the members, I move for adoption and provide a committee report so we can present it to the full body for action in the next session. So move.
Thank you, Vice Chair. There is a motion to provide to furnish a committee report for the passage of House Bill 24-02, and it has been seconded. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye. All those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. House Bill 24-02 is hereby recommended for to furnish a committee report for the passage on our next session. Thank you, members. On our next item on our order of business, we have House Bill 24-05 to establish provisions for jaywalking and for other purposes. Discussion. Recognize Representative Flores, who is also the author of this legislation.
Can I request maybe we could put the table this bill for now, so we can maybe out of recommend for amendment, maybe since there's some recommendation or some opinion from the public defender regarding the 200 feet crosswalk, maybe the format maybe try to remove that section that says feet, so we can just maybe put something that says that whenever there's a crosswalk, a pedestrian has to use the crosswalk to cross the street. Other than having confused that they need to make a tape measure to determine how many feet if the pedestrian cross other than the crosswalk. So can we table this for now? Then make the floor maybe a later time. Thank you.
There's a motion to table House Bill 24-05, and it has been seconded. All those in favor of that motion, say aye. All those opposed, say nay. House Bill 24-05 is hereby tabled for further discussion. Next, under our order of business, we have House Bill 24-10 to establish a change of name legal procedure in the CNMI. Before I open the floor for discussion, members, I am the author of this bill. I will not be asking to move on this bill today. I will be soliciting comments. So I'm also requesting that we table this, and I will be providing the members whatever comments that comes to the committee regarding House Bill 24-10. All right, there's a motion to table House Bill 24-10, and it has been seconded. All those in favor of that motion, say aye. Those opposed, say nay. House Bill 24-10 is hereby tabled. Next, under our order of business, we have House Bill under item E, House Bill 24-14, to establish the Office of Financial Integrity and Compliance, OFIC, and the OFIC Oversight Committee to improve the CNMI government's financial management and reporting. Discussion. Recognize Representative Flores. And I believe you are the author of this bill?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, I am. And in light of the lack of transparency when we're talking about taxpayer funds, certification of funds made by either the legislative branch or any other department into the Secretary of Finance or Department of Finance. And the lack and various reportings stating that the office or the Department of Finance lacks internal procedures, has lacked internal procedures for many years, has really caused some issues in regards to external funds such as grants and how we manage those. sources, those funds. So the intent of this bill is to really honestly have this oversight committee almost just like a PUC commission, right? Somebody needs to answer to the requests. And when we're talking about the public auditor, which I'm sure people are going to say, well, what's the difference? You have a public auditor, now you want this. Well, the public auditor is tasked with, yes, preparing these audits. But as we know from the Secretary of Finance, these reports will not be done until May of 2025. And you're talking about 2023, 2024 audits. Now, with this committee, at least there is another leg that can also assist with these findings, with these requests. But at the end of the day, we just continue to have these agencies in charge of doing something, but are either too busy or whatever reason they state to us. This committee will also have at least another leg for us to request for these indiscrepancies and to address those. Because when I call OPA and say, can you please address this, blah, we can't talk about it. We don't know if it's under investigation. We don't know anything, but they can never talk about certain things. And the plea of the public, especially the taxpayers, is where are these monies going? Who is checking the Secretary of Finance or the department, not the secretary, but the Department of Finance? Who is in charge? If the auditor is too busy doing 57 divisions, desk audit, we can just continue. And we just got the audit report. And again, 14 findings. Many of them is because of the lack of internal control. I just got an email this morning that now there's a memo from the Secretary of Finance kind of telling us what to do and how to handle all of these requests. That doesn't tell me anything. Doesn't help us. That's an internal issue that they need to correct. But I ask that this committee pass this in its form. I'm sure there's going to be some impacts to that. Maybe the Senate can, scrutinize this bill and send it back. But I do ask that this committee pass it in its form, prepare the committee report, and if the Senate wants to have a jab at this and improve it, or work with us to figure out a way to strengthen it, I'm open. But the discussion needs to happen, and the bill is made to start this discussion so that there is a check and balance in areas including the Department of Finance. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Representative Flores. The floor is still open for discussion.
Nobody's quiet.
Discussion, members? Or would you like to make your motion, Floor Leader?
Thank you, Chairman. At this time, I move that we pass House Bill 2414 and have the committee prepare its committee report for the next session for vote. Thank you. I yield. So move.
Second.
There is a motion to furnish a committee report for House Bill 24-14 in its current form for passage on our next session, and it has been seconded. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. The motion carries. House Bill 24-14 hereby recommended for the passage in our next session. Our next order of business, we have item F, House Bill 24-15, to establish public sector employee and public sector employer relations through organized labor within the Commonwealth and for other purposes. Discussion. Recognized, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, colleagues, for allowing me to speak on this legislation. 24-15, although it's establishing a public sector employment, public sector employer relations through organized labor within the Commonwealth, it seems like it's a new legislation, but it's not. Public Law 1-20 under 4 CMC 9237 already had that language in the inception of the Commonwealth government. So this is updating all the information so that we can have this as an option to the various entities that are qualified to have these types of options for their employees. In addition to that, to updating the language and updating the information under 24-15, 24-15 is very clear as well that the bargaining agreements can't exceed what's available and funding by the CNMI government. So they can't go off the wall to come up with crazy numbers to be addressed for the respective employees and their respective entities. At the same time, 24-15, unlike Public Law 1-20, also assists the employer side of the bargaining agreement. So if there's no objection from the members, I respectfully ask for support that we move to adopt 24-15 through a committee report and present it to the full body for action in the next session. So moved.
There's a motion to adopt House Bill 24-15 for passage in our next session, and it has been seconded. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye. All those opposed, say nay. House Bill 24-15 is hereby recommended for passage in our next session. On our next order of business, we have House Bill 24-16 to prioritize kinship placement for children in protective custody by requiring the Division of Youth Services identify and assess suitable kinship caregivers within 24 hours of removing a child from their home, mandating expedited judicial review of kinship placement recommendations, and prohibiting the placement of such children in confinement facilities. And members, before I open the floor for discussion, I do want to note that representatives under the Division of Youth Services had made a request that we hold off on this bill so that we can allow them to comment. Anyways, the floor is now open for discussion.
Thank you, Chairman. We're about to say that to put it on the table so we can make wait comments from the Division of Youth Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Flores. I do know that you are the author of this bill. There is a motion to table House Bill 24-16 to gather further comments, and it has been seconded. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye. All those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. House Bill 24-16 is hereby tabled for comments. Next, under order of business, we have item H, House Bill 24-19, to rename the CNMI Scholarship Office to the CNMI Scholarship Office and Financial Assistance Office. Discussion. Recognize Representative Flores.
Thank you. And just, for historical purposes, I believe this was a discussion that we had with the Scholarship Office back in the 23rd Legislature, where several of us sat to hear their plea for the change in their name. There is no financial impact on this. They had requested to change their name because they're not only receiving money, but they're also giving money out. So they wanted to make sure that it's in line with what they're doing, receive and give at the same time. And I think there was 4 of us that they met that day. We're all kind of here now, so I hope that we can at least provide them this one ask, since we sliced their SNIL by 40-some thousand. So If there is no objection from the committee, I motion that we pass House Bill 2419 in its form and prepare a committee report for the next session for vote. Thank you. So move.
Before I move with that motion, I just also like to state that I did receive comments supporting this legislation. Don't ask me how I know. I'm just kidding. There's a motion to adopt House Bill 24-19 to adopt a committee report for passage, and it has been seconded. All those in favor of that motion say aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. House Bill 24-19 is hereby recommended for passage on our next session. And then next, under our order of business, we have item I, House Bill 24-22, to repeal and reenact the Justice Center Fund Revolving Act. Discussion. Recognize Representative Flores.
Thank you, Chairman. So it's no secret that I've been trying to get this bill passed since the 23rd legislature. And the reason for that is because I believe that public safety also needs funding. And when this was actually when monies were given or kind of transferred to the fund for whatever purpose, such as, the building of their beautiful courthouse, I just feel that, I got a certified copy of the fund balance, and I've also looked at their budget request. And they get some federal funds that also support salary, that supports operations. But like everything right now, there's a courthouse in Rhoda, there's a courthouse in Tinian. Everything that comes out of supporting also those two courthouses come from the general fund or this justice revolving fund to aid in that. Now, I would hope, and I think we should have the conversation with the 1st and 2nd senatorial district as well to put money aside for the maintenance of those courthouses in their respected islands. But DPS continues to lose staff. DPS continues to struggle, and they've been struggling. And I heard the comments made from Ms. Sonia, and I empathize with their plea. But they've also migrated to a system that, what is called the e-ticketing system. How are they going to get the e-ticket without DPS? And how much of the e-ticket percentage do they get out of that? But they cannot support e-ticket citation without DPS. Furthermore, I've been getting questions from indigent families and individuals about the high fees that they charge. Now, if you're not rich, you need an attorney to do all of that. And I think our poverty rate is at, 40-some%? That's almost half. We still have cases that still require, based on their rule, the autonomy for them to their canon laws that they can and do whatever it is and hire outside attorneys or judges, pro temps, for cases. But they're also asking for a salary increase in their budget. Now, how's that going to be supported? I'm pretty sure from the Justice Fund, because they have great freedoms to use it for maintenance and for other purposes. But we owe it to the public safety and to everyone that's in the line of enforcement to share funds, not just take everything. And maybe we need to have a further discussion about, redesigning some of these enforcement legs and maybe having them also put a percentage to an account that we can create to help with that, the judges. But at this point, this is about need. And we need to support DPS at the end of the day. We've supported the needs of the courts for a long time. And I know that this it's not retro, so I don't think it's gonna have any impact to the fiscal year budget, unless I'm wrong. And if it doesn't, then at least that money can be ready for DPS. But honestly, I ask my colleagues to support this because they need each other. DPS and the court, they gotta work together. And I think it's too long that this Justice Fund has been there, and then they're still gonna, fix up the courthouses for Road and Tinian. I mean, sounds very extravagant considering the economic crisis that we're in right now. I think some things can wait and other things can be attended to, like DPS. So if there is no, I'm open for more discussion.
Madam Floor Leader, if I may,
Yes.
I'd like to also maybe say a few words about this, but maybe if we can recommend that maybe we table this bill for now and we have further discussion, because we recently got the comment from the courts not too long ago. And from the looks of it, it looks like there's going to be some potential fiscal impacts. And maybe I can call in the judiciary and we can sit and further discuss this. I know I do respect your intent to assist DPS, very noble intent. We can fast track this bill if you like, but I'd like to maybe call in the court so we have further dialogue on this. If that's not. Thank you.
And again, this would be up to the committee, right, at some point. But I've also had discussions and I know what's at stake.
Maybe we can have discussions as a committee, no?
Yes, and I just want to make it clear for the record, for those people that are watching, that I'm very aware with what's happening. And I think DPS is also aware. But then again, this is, once again, an issue outside of this argument, right? Is these audits that are taking too long. Therefore, subjecting funds that are grant-based, and CJPA works just like Office of Grants Management. That's the clearinghouse for all of these grants under the Department of Justice. I get it. But I have to be very clear, and I must say this. I'm fully aware, sir, Chairman, but if that is what the committee intends to hold it, and we can have that discussion, I'd like to put a timeline on it because I know that budget is coming up, and I don't want to talk about my experience on the 23rd legislature when I tried to push this the first time. But for the record, if that is what this committee decides to do as a whole, I'm willing to work with the committee and bend to hear out and find out why. Whatever questions you guys have, I'm open to that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Floor Leader, and I appreciate that and point taken. Thank you. And if you like, would you like to schedule a date?
Yes,
While we're here?
please, Mr. Chairman, if you can. I don't know what everyone's schedule is, but I like timelines. If we can do maybe between maybe 1 week or 2 weeks, I'm open to that. Again, because then we would also like to call DPS as well.
Agreed. Thank you. And I just saw from the courts if they're respectfully requesting for at least 2 weeks. Is that okay?
That's fine. We can meet here, but I also recommend that this committee call in DPS.
Yes, of course.
The commissioner and Ms. Kay Enos.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Floor Leader. I recognize Representative Yumo.
Thank you, Chairman. And just to register a comment, because I know this, I guess the word Justice Center revolving fund. So I think the committee what needs to be done is if this should be pushed out is actually separate the civil fines from the Justice Center revolving fund, or the word fees, but fines deriving from DPS, I'm okay with that, but I believe the civil fines and any fees the court imposes should be separated from this account so that it won't be commingled anymore. So that's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Yumo. And when we do schedule this confirmed date, maybe please note that and bring that back up if you can. Thank you.
I'm giving it up to the committee to
Recommendation duly noted. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Yumo. All right, there's a motion to table House Bill 24-22 to schedule a meeting with the Judiciary, and it has been seconded. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. House Bill 24-22 is hereby tabled unto our meeting of the Judiciary. Moving forward under next order of business, we have under item J, we have House Bill 24-23 to amend 9 CMC subsection 2116 to update the definitions of veteran and disabled veteran to allow a valid veteran ID card to be used as proof of veteran status when applying for a veteran's license plate. Discussion.
Chair, can we,
Recognize Rep. Yumo.
because the author's not here, I recommend that we table until the author shows up, because I have some questions for the author.
Okay, and in that process, I will also be soliciting comments and reaching out to the Veterans Affairs Office. I recognize Representative Aldan.
Thank you, Speaker. As a veteran, let me just speak as a veteran. You know, when you get out of the military, you know, technically, if you don't retire, you technically don't get an ID card, correct? No, colleague?
I believe anyone that gets out, they get an ID, but it doesn't say on that card, service connected.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a VA health card.
Right, it's a VA health card, but then, you know, when you do get out, everybody gets a DD-214, and that DD-214 form, you know, is pretty much a ID already in itself. So I don't know why we have to legislate something that doesn't need to be legislated. You know what I mean? So we're making, you know, veterans, you know, have to acquire something that technically they don't really need one because they already have one on their DD-214, which everybody gets automatically. You know what I mean? And should you lose it, like your ID, you could always request for one. You know, and mind you also that not every veteran wants a VA license plate. So I'm not sure why we have to legislate something that doesn't even need to be legislated. That's my take on it. Thank you.
Is there a motion to table, Representative? You will? Oh. Also, there is a motion to table House Bill 24-23, and it has been seconded. All those in favor of the motion to table, say aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. House Bill 24-23 is hereby tabled. Next, under our order of business, we have item K, House Bill 24-25, to establish a mandatory consecutive sentencing for repeat of felony offenders on probation or parole, and to ensure consistent application of sentencing laws. Discussion.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Last session, I was promoting residents of other villages considering relocation to move to Election District 2. 2 days later, a former legislator, his home was burglarized by a repeat offender. And it happened right behind my home, Susupi. I know that the public defender and some lawyers are against this, but let me just share some information. DOC currently has a capacity of housing 500 inmates, but currently houses little over 200 inmates. In the 2023-2024 report, the United States Department of Justice originally claimed that the crime rate nationally went down, when in fact it was later discovered that the crime rate was underreported by certain states. The Department of Corrections Commissioner went out last year that he was interested in the possibility of housing inmates from Guam as a way to generate revenue, and to also fill up the empty rooms with inmates from Guam, which was opposed by residents here in Saipan. The 28 U.S. states have enacted 3 strikes laws that are much more stricter than what I propose. In fact, on the 3rd strike, they recommend life sentences. They want life sentences for 3rd strikes. On this thing, I'm not asking for life sentences. We have, in 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court in Ewing versus California ruled that life sentences in the 3 strikes laws were constitutional for 3rd felony convictions. The issue that the public defender is raising with a report from California is absurd. It's based on an outdated report. And like I said, if you read the media now with California's issues, they've got big issues with crime. In fact, Senator Schiff was confronted at a Target when he was shopping. His bags were stolen at the airport, so he went shopping at Target. The cashier or the attendant in the business told him that the state crime thing sucks because of the lack of tough on crime in California. Some states like Georgia have 2 strikes law and provide for mandatory life sentences. CNMI criminal recidivism rates are high. The fact that the public defender is using California outdated statistic just is mind-boggling for me. Earlier, we heard from members of the Coalition for Sexual Assault of Minors stating that some of these crimes being perpetrated on minors were done by repeat offenders. You know, this is troubling. Alleged criminal offenders are given due process rights. All I'm asking for is that, you know, we start weeding out the bad apples and we make them think about what they're doing, because we cannot keep on going on. The CNMI cannot sustain its tourism if we keep on having crimes on tourists, crimes on minors, crimes on residents. When are we going to put our foot down and say, guys, your party is over? You know, you cannot keep terrorizing innocent residents. We need to start acting and create policies or legislation that makes residents feel safer. Because right now, I can tell you right now, with what happened to that former legislator, even myself, I'm even like looking at, if people pass by my house, it's all boarded up, because you know what? I think 6 years ago, I was also a victim of crime. And you know, the thing is, who speaks up for the victims? When you lose your property, it cannot be replaced anymore. All my kids' jewelry that, you know, could have been passed down to their kids is gone already. Cannot get that back. All these jewelries that were passed on by heirlooms from our parents and our grandparents, those are gone. You cannot say that even with a high sentence that's going to resolve it. It doesn't. It's always there. It's a stigma already of being a victim of crime. And what this does is put an end to the parties that these guys are doing. When the guys that burglarized my home, what they caught on CCTV was they high-fived each other, congratulating, and they used a minor to go in. You know, I'm asking my colleagues, you know, that aside from this, you guys also know, like, people, residents of other villages, friends that were victims. Susupi, CK, that's one of the highest places for crime. How do we address that? They're talking about having rehabilitation. Guys, the people that are committing the crime are adults. I came from a broken home, you know, it's no secret. But did I go out and steal? No. Did I go out and hurt people by taking their property? No, I didn't. I work for everything that I achieve. But we need to start setting examples for people that, you know what? You have a chance to rehabilitate yourself. It's out there. You just need to go get it. But don't use the criminal justice system, the courts, as a way to deter your sentences by going through an alternative sentencing program. That's not going to fly anymore. And I think we just need to start putting an end to these guys' parties, these guys' celebrations after they hurt a family. And I think the time is now, and I'm asking, Chair, that we adopt 24-25 to move for passage in the next session and prepare the committee reports for our next session. If there are no objections, I'm asking my colleagues to please support this.
Thank you, members. There is a motion for us to adopt a committee report for passage in our next session, and it has been seconded. All those in favor of that motion say aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries. House Bill 24-25 is hereby adopted for passage on our next session. And under our last item under our order of business for new business, we have item L, House Bill 24-26, to amend the crime of child abuse. Members, I would also like to note again that this is one of the legislation that DYS had respectfully requested if we could hold back so they could provide their comments and carefully look at the bill themselves. So I just wanted to put that out there, but we're now under discussion. Recognized Vice Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. And I believe Ms. Tenorio had also mentioned some points regarding this legislation under Section 2. I believe it's lines 10 through 12, if I'm not mistaken, so that we can go back to her comment on that on the specific legislation, so we can also include that in our discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice. The floor is still open.
Move to table for further comments, Chairman.
Second, any second? There's a motion to table House Bill 24-26 to provide further amendments and to seek further comments. And it has been seconded. All those in favor of that motion say aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. House Bill 24-26 is hereby tabled for further discussion. Thank you, members. And then we are now under our next order of business, item V, or under item, sorry, my apologies. Item 5, miscellaneous. Recognized Representative Yumo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just so that we're clear, my comment on House Bill 24-1 is only a comment. I didn't it wasn't a debate or with Rep. Marisa, because I don't want the media to think that I'm against it. I'm just saying that the court has set precedent. That's all I'm saying. So it's not a debate. I am for 24-1 HS1. So I want to be clear to the media. Thank you.
Thank you for your clarification, Representative Yomo. Recognize Representative Flores.
Thank you, Chairman. And I know that you had mentioned that in regard to House Bill 2422, that would be tabled between 1 and 2 weeks. You did mention that you would be inviting the court. However, I did not hear that you'll be inviting other entities. And at this point, I'd like to, for the record, request that you invite CJPA, DPS, and the court, because there are many other nonprofits also maybe that might be at risk, but we also need clarity, and this discussion might go into why the Justice Center Fund is such a big issue, and in terms of money, everybody wants it. So I think if you could invite CJPA, DPS, and the Judiciary for this meeting that would be scheduled between 1 and 2 weeks, I would greatly appreciate that.
Point of clarification.
Yeah, just point of clarification. Why CJPA? Because this legislation, as I understand, the CJPA grant that they're receiving is an issue because of the audit, right?
Are we on miscellaneous,
We're on
Vice Chair?
miscellaneous,
So
yeah.
do you want to recess?
No, I'm
before-
asking. Yeah, I'm asking for that, for the CJPA.
Right, but this is miscellaneous, but why are you asking me a question
I'm
on?
asking why CJPA, because the legislation has
Okay.
not.
Oh, the reason why we want CJPA here is because the audits, right? And we need to understand what other agencies within the judicial would be at risk, because we do have the domestic violence, which will probably affect family court, but we also know that the DPS also plays a role in attending to the 911 calls in areas that involve or cases that involve domestic violence. So I just want to make sure that CJPA is here so that we fully understand what are the grants that the court get, that they handle as a clearinghouse, is going to be affected, because then that will give us the money figure. And then if we are to plan, at least we plan accordingly, and that we plan on information that we have and not guess or support because of whatever policies or politics that may be at play.
Thank you, Representative
Thank you,
Flores. I will be reaching out to CJPA and I will be forwarding them a copy of this bill. And maybe if they have anything to add and if they would like to partake in the meeting, or we can also do that. Thank you, Representative Flores. The floor is still open under miscellaneous. Members, I would also like to note that if you have any other issues, agencies that you'd like to meet with regarding oversights, or that you refer to my office and we can schedule meetings with them as well. All right. Anything else under miscellaneous? Okay, on our last order of business, item 6, adjournment. Can I get a motion for adjournment? There's a motion for adjournment and it has been seconded. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye. All those opposed, stay. Motion carries. Thank you, members, and thank you to the public. Appreciate it.